The whip scars on slave Joshua's back had barely healed when the same man was now hunting down the outlaws who chased him. But Joshua King's story hadn't begun the day he put his freedom papers in his pocket. The real story started on that dark day when revenge mixed with justice. On the dusty roads of Texas, Joshua King's horse kept rhythm with its hooves on the ground. This 32-year-old man had become the nightmare of towns, but no one remembered that 7 years ago these same hands had been bound with chains. Joshua didn't want to remember either, but the scar tissue on his back reminded him of his past every morning in the mirror. Today he had a different job in hand. This wasn't the usual poster. A familiar name was written on the paper: Walter Morrison, his former master, $5,000 reward, slave trafficking, murder, theft. His crimes were listed on the paper, but the real crime wasn't written. It didn't say he had stolen Joshua's childhood, whipped his back, treated him as less than human. Joshua stopped, folded the poster, and put it in his jacket's inner pocket, capturing Walter Morrison. This was irony. The slave would now be hunting his master. When he arrived in Riverside Town, the sun was at its peak. He dismounted in front of the saloon, his spurs clicking as they hit the ground. The townspeople looked at him with familiar glances. Joshua King, bounty hunter. His fame had grown with every man he caught, but nobody knew his story. As he entered the saloon, conversations inside stopped. Joshua was a tall, broad-shouldered man. His skin was sunburned, his eyes always alert. Twin pistols at his belt, a rifle on his shoulder. He had a professional appearance. "Bartender," he said in a low voice, "I'm looking for Walter Morrison." The bartender was a fat, sweaty man. His eyes were evasive. "Don't know, sir. Never heard of anyone like that." Joshua placed a silver coin on the counter. "Can you remember now?" I really don't know." Just then, an old man sitting in the back corner of the saloon stood up. Joshua hadn't even turned his head, but he heard a very familiar voice behind him. "Joshua, Joshua, my boy." Joshua's blood froze. That voice, that damned voice. He slowly turned. Walter Morrison stood before him. His hair had turned white, his face was lined with wrinkles, but he was the same man, the man who had beaten Joshua, whipped him, tried to sell him at the slave market. "My boy." Walter approached with a smile. "How I missed you. How you've grown." Joshua's hand had automatically gone to his pistol. Everyone in the saloon held their breath and watched. "Walter Morrison," Joshua said slowly, "you're under arrest." Walter's smile froze on his face. "What?" "Joshua, I raised you. You didn't raise me." Joshua's voice was like metal. "You beat me. You sold me at the slave market." There was no sound in the saloon. Everyone was watching this confrontation in shock. Learning that bounty hunter Joshua King was actually a former slave was a situation none of them had expected. Walter began making calming gestures with his hands. "Joshua, those old days, those were different times. You're free now. Look how successful you've become." "Success?" Joshua stepped forward. "Do you think I'm successful?" "Of course. You're powerful now, famous. I've become many other things now, Walter. But most importantly, I've become someone who catches people like you." Joshua pulled out handcuffs. "Extend your hands." Walter began backing away. "Joshua, please. I'm an old man now. You could say I had a family. I have grandchildren too." "I would never have had a family," Joshua replied coldly. "You're responsible for that." "But Joshua, my name is Joshua King. You will address me as such." Walter's face reddened. His old authoritarian attitudes began to resurface. "How dare you speak to me like this? I made you—" "You made me nothing," Joshua interrupted. "I made myself. You only stood in the way." Just then Walter did something unexpected. He pulled out a small derringer from inside his jacket. "I'm sorry, Joshua, but I can't take you back." Everyone in the saloon began screaming, started hiding behind tables, but Joshua didn't even move. "Put that gun down, Walter." "No, you were my slave. You're still my slave." Joshua smiled. For the first time, a real smile. "Walter, you've learnt nothing. I'm no longer your slave. I'm your hunter." Then, with such a quick movement, he drew his pistol that Walter couldn't even see it. The derringer flew from Walter's hand, shattering against the wall. "Now put on the handcuffs." Walter tremblingly put on the handcuffs. Joshua took him by the arm and led him out of the saloon. Outside, the townspeople had gathered, watching curiously. "This man is Walter Morrison," Joshua announced loudly. "Wanted for slave trafficking, murder, theft. Reward is $5,000. Murmurs circulated through the crowd, but Joshua also heard a voice he didn't want to hear. "Joshua, were you a slave?" He turned his head. A young woman had asked this, Sarah Williams, the town teacher. She had always been kind to Joshua. They had even eaten together a few times. Joshua didn't answer for a long time. Then he nodded. "Yes, I was a slave." A wave of shock spread through the crowd. Bounty hunter Joshua King, former slave Joshua. Is this possible?" Sarah was in shock. "Very possible," Joshua replied. "And now excuse me, I need to deliver this man to the sheriff." As they walked toward the sheriff's office, Walter began grumbling. "Joshua, this won't end well. People will see you differently now." "Good," Joshua replied. "Now they'll see the real me. You're still a slave son." Joshua stopped, looked at Walter. "No, Walter, you're still a slave owner's son. I'm a free man." Sheriff Jackson met Joshua in his office. He was middle-aged, honest man who had worked with Joshua many times. "Joshua, did you catch Walter Morrison?" "Yes, Sheriff. Here's the poster. Here's the man." While the sheriff put Walter in the cell, he asked, "Joshua, what that man said, is it true? Were you really a slave?" "Yes, Sheriff. 7 years ago I escaped from Walter Morrison's plantation." Sheriff Jackson was surprised, but tried to remain professional. Does this change anything? Do you think it should?" The sheriff thought. "No, you're a good bounty hunter, Joshua. Your past doesn't matter to me." "Thank you, Sheriff." As Joshua left the office, Sheriff Jackson called after him. "Joshua, did you catch him for revenge?" Joshua paused. He had asked himself this question too. "I don't know, Sheriff. Maybe, but I made a legal arrest. That's enough." When Joshua returned to the saloon, the atmosphere had changed. People were looking at him, but no longer with respect, but with curiosity. Slave Joshua and bounty hunter Joshua were the same person. Sarah Williams came up to him. "Joshua, can I talk to you?" "Sure, Sarah." They stood in a quiet corner outside the saloon. Were you really a slave?" "Yes, Sarah. I escaped from Walter Morrison's plantation 7 years ago. This is incredible. You're such a strong, successful man." "Now I am." Sarah was amazed. "How did you do it? How did you go from slavery to being a bounty hunter?" Joshua didn't answer for a long time. Then he began to speak. "Sarah, when I escaped, I was 25 years old. I had nothing. I would have died of hunger and cold, but a man found me. Isaiah Jackson, a free black man. He taught me everything. Reading, writing, using weapons, living, but most importantly, self-respect." Sarah listened silently. "Isaiah told me, Joshua, you weren't born a slave. You were born human. Slavery was your condition, not your identity. Wise man, the wisest man. When he died, he told me one last thing. What was it? Joshua, don't seek revenge, seek justice. They're not the same thing." Sarah was trying to understand. So was capturing Walter Morrison revenge or justice? Joshua thought, "I don't know, Sarah, maybe both." That evening, Joshua sat alone in his hotel room. Walter Morrison had been caught, was in the sheriff's cell. The $5,000 reward was in Joshua's pocket. But there was a strange emptiness inside him. There was a knock at his door. When he opened it, Walter's son stood before him, James Morrison, in his 30s, a man who resembled his father. "You're Joshua King?" "Yes, I'm James Morrison, Walter Morrison's son." Joshua tensed. "Come in." James entered but didn't sit. "You arrested my father?" "Yes, legally." "Are you our former slave?" Joshua looked at the man. "Yes, James, I'm your former slave." James looked surprised. Do you remember me?" "I remember. You were 12 years old then. You tried to teach me to read books." James's face softened. "You remember that?" "I remember everything, James. I didn't know what my father did to you. I was small. I know. James finally sat down. Joshua, is my father guilty? Did he really commit those crimes? Joshua pulled out the poster and put it on the table. Look, James read, slave trafficking, murder, theft. When were these crimes committed? Within the last 3 years. James nodded. Father changed after he lost the plantation. He became capable of doing anything for money. How did he lose the plantation? After slavery was banned, he couldn't find workers, but he couldn't adapt. He continued to use the old methods. Joshua understood. Walter Morrison hadn't changed. He still didn't see people as human. James, are you different? I hope I am, Joshua. When you tried to teach me to read books, you were also human. But I was too small to understand that then. Do you understand now? Now I understand. That night, Joshua couldn't sleep. The past kept spinning in his mind. Walter Morrison's plantation, the sound of whips, the noise of chains, hunger, fear. But there were also different memories. James Morrison secretly showing him books, Aunt Sally working in the kitchen teaching him songs, looking at the night sky and dreaming of freedom. When morning came, Joshua went to the sheriff's office. Sheriff, when will you transfer Walter Morrison? Today, federal marshals are coming. Can I talk to him? Sure, Joshua. But why? I don't know. Maybe for closure. When Joshua entered the cell, Walter was sitting on his bed. He looked old and beaten. Joshua, Walter, are you really going to hand me over to the federal marshals? Yes. Walter remained silent for a long time. Joshua, I treated you badly. Yes, you did. I'm sorry. Joshua was surprised. He had never expected to hear an apology from Walter Morrison. It's too late, Walter. I know, but I still wanted to say it. Why? Why now? Walter raised his head. Because James came last night. He told me everything. You treated them well. Joshua didn't understand. What did you tell James? James told me that you could have killed them. When they learned you were a former slave, you could have taken revenge, but you didn't. No, I didn't. Why? Joshua thought. Because I didn't become like you, Walter. I remained human. Walter bowed his head. You're a better man than me, Joshua King. I always was, Walter. You just couldn't see it. When the federal marshals arrived, Joshua was waiting outside. They would take Walter Morrison to be tried. Marshal Williams knew Joshua. Joshua King, good job. Catching Walter Morrison wasn't easy. Thank you, Marshal. By the way, Joshua, I heard your story. Joshua tensed. My story, that you're a former slave, now a bounty hunter. Quite impressive. Thank you. I want to ask an interesting question. Did you catch Walter Morrison for revenge? Joshua was hearing this question for the 3rd time. He still didn't have a definite answer. Marshal, I'm a bounty hunter. My job is to catch wanted people. Walter Morrison was wanted. That's a diplomatic answer. It's a correct answer. The marshal smiled. Fair enough. Joshua, federal marshals need their own bounty hunters. Would you be interested? What do you mean? I mean you're very talented. Would you like to work at the federal level? Joshua thought. Bigger criminals, harder jobs, but better money and more respect. I'll think about it, Marshal. As they took Walter Morrison away, he looked at Joshua through the wagon window. Joshua, what, Walter? You're free, really free. Joshua didn't answer. But Walter was right. He was truly free. That evening in the saloon, Sarah Williams found Joshua. Joshua, are you leaving town tomorrow? Yes, Sarah, I have a new job. I heard you might become a federal marshal. Maybe. Sarah remained quiet for a while. Joshua, I want to ask you something. Ask, how did you feel when you caught Walter Morrison? How did I feel? Yes. Were you taking revenge or seeking justice? Joshua thought for a long time. Sarah, when I caught Walter Morrison, I wasn't thinking about the bad things he did to me. What were you thinking about? The bad things he could do to other people. That means justice. I think so. Sarah smiled. You're a good man, Joshua King. I try to be a good man. That's enough. The next morning, Joshua was leaving town. Mounted on his horse, he looked at the town one last time on the road. Here he had caught Walter Morrison, but more importantly, here he had accepted who he was. Joshua King wasn't slave Joshua, but slave Joshua was also part of Joshua King. The past wasn't something to be denied. It was something to be overcome. James Morrison came to him one last time. "Joshua, thank you for my father. What are you thanking me for, James? For not killing him, for not taking revenge?" "James, revenge only creates new pain." Are these Isaiah Jackson's words? Yes, and now they're my words too. Do you forgive my father? Joshua thought, "James, forgiveness is a process. Maybe I'll forgive him someday, but now I'm just letting the past go." James nodded. "That's enough." As Joshua began riding his horse, the town was left behind. He was going toward new adventures, new criminals, new injustices. But this time it was different. This time it wasn't slave Joshua going, but free Joshua King. His first job as a federal marshal had been to catch slave traders. This was irony. The former slave was now catching slave traders. 6 months later, Joshua's fame had spread throughout the territory. Federal bounty hunter Joshua King was the most feared name among outlaws, but at the same time he was the most respected name among honest folks. Because Joshua wasn't just working for money, he was working for justice. One day, in New Mexico, he had caught a gang trafficking slaves at a ranch and rescued 5 slaves. The youngest was an 8-year-old child. The child had looked at Joshua and said, "Mister, are you an angel?" Joshua had laughed. "No, child, I'm just like you, just lucky." "How lucky? I met a good man. He taught me my life." "Will I meet someone like that too?" "You already have." "Who?" "Me." That night, looking at the stars, Joshua was thinking about Isaiah Jackson. He remembered his words. "Joshua, freedom isn't just breaking chains. Freedom is breaking others' chains." Joshua now understood. He hadn't just won his own freedom, he was helping others win their freedom too. Walter Morrison had been tried in federal court and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Joshua hadn't attended the hearing. His business with him was finished. But James Morrison had written a letter to Joshua. "Dear Joshua, my father is in prison, but he's changing. For the first time he feels real remorse for the mistakes he made. Your example affected him because you didn't take revenge. He's also learning forgiveness. Thank you." After reading this letter, Joshua had truly forgiven Walter Morrison for the first time, because Walter was finally learning. Years passed. Joshua King became a legendary bounty hunter. But he always acted fairly, always justly, and for every criminal he caught, he used part of the money he received to help freed slaves. He opened schools, helped them find jobs, helped them build new lives, because Joshua now knew true freedom is fighting not just for yourself, but for everyone. Slave Joshua had died. Joshua King lived, and he was the guardian of freedom. 10 years later, Joshua King was no longer doing active bounty hunting. He had become a U.S. Marshal, had his own team, but there was one day he never forgot, the day Walter Morrison got out of prison. Joshua was at the courthouse that day for another case. Walter Morrison came out, aged, a changed man. His eyes searched for Joshua, found him. He came to him. "Joshua King." "Walter Morrison. I'm sorry for everything. I know, Walter. Do you forgive me?" Joshua looked at him for a long time. His former master, former rival, former enemy. "Walter, I forgave you long ago, but this time not for you, for me." "I don't understand." "Forgiving is setting you free. I didn't want to carry your mistakes." Walter nodded. "You're wise, Joshua. You can learn too, Walter. Isn't it too late? It's never too late." As Walter was leaving, Joshua called to him one last time. "Walter, yes, you're free now, really free. Use it right this time." Walter smiled. "I'll try to learn." And so slave Joshua's story ended. Joshua King's story continued. Because freedom isn't something to be won, it's something to be chosen anew every day. Because justice isn't just for ourselves, it's something to fight for everyone. And because forgiveness isn't weakness, it's the greatest strength. Joshua King had learned this, and he continued to teach it. Every day, with every decision, with every breath, slave Joshua had died. Joshua King lived, and he was the guardian of freedom and justice. If these powerful stories move you, click on the next video on your screen. More stories await you, where courage and justice combine in unexpected ways. Don't forget to subscribe and show your Super Chat support to help us continue bringing you these stories. Your support means everything to us.